Let's take a look here at our rotor. These little cracks in it. Caliper, it's just been leaking. Hi everyone, for those of you that are new to our channel, my name is David and my wife Ninette and our little kitten Tansy. We live full-time in our motorhome. And today we're going to talk about a little issue that we've noticed where we've got some fluid leaking out of our rear dual. And so I'm going to look into that a little bit and see kind of what's going on. Right now we're kind of in the Salt Lake area at a friend's place that's got a really good driveway, nice solid surface that we can lift the rig up on and kind of check things out. I've already checked out the brakes and I noticed that the rotor has little cracks in them. So we're for sure going to be replacing the rotors and possibly the calipers and for sure the brake pads. So a little bit of a brake job and then figure out what's going on with this, where we're leaking fluid, either a seal or if it's a caliper, we'll replace the caliper. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and check into that. Alright, I need to insert something here because this video took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. And so I need to just tell you that I have broken up into chapters. So if you look in the contents below, or the comments below, you can see that it's broken out by different timelines, and you can also look on the actual timeline of the video and jump to a section if you want to jump ahead or whatever and skip whatever babble you don't want to listen to. So get where you want to go and get the information that you need is kind of how I look at this. So this is to help you. The other thing I wanted to say is I just wanted to do a disclaimer that, you know what, I'm not a professional and I just do things the way that I want the job to be done if I was going to do it myself, and in this case I am. I'm not opposed to having other people do it, but you remember we do live in our motorhome full time, and we're currently in the Salt Lake area. They want us to leave our rig there for 6 weeks while they work us in. It's like, you can't do that when you're full-time. So anyway, so that's why I'm doing the job myself, and I think I can do it just fine. Hopefully you'll find out that you can do it too. It's not really that hard of a job. So also I wanted to just point out that I did make up a list of things that you need ahead of time. But after I finished the job, I realized there was a lot of stuff extra that I needed. So I've kind of created this next little section after the fact. These are all the tools I ended up actually using. So just be aware of that. These are tools that you'll need and things that you need to actually think about before you do the job. I got a nice heavy jack, 12-ton jack, because my motorhome's pretty heavy. I've got a jack stand rated at 3 tons. Which is more than what this one wheel holds that we're going to work on, and so that's our safety. And then I've got a light over here on the left. I've got a 4-inch pipe that I'm going to use to put the seal back in that we're going to remove, and then a pound of metal that I actually set on top of the pipe to bang it to give me an even hit as I hit down on it. So you'd have to come up with something there because most people probably aren't going to have that. But I also have a tire bar here that's a tire iron that helps you put the tires on and off, and a crowbar for getting the seal out that we'll do a little later, and pry bars, cleaning fluids, some oil to put back in because these bearings aren't greased. They're just they run with the rear end oil. It's all floating in there, so the oil goes back and forth. So we got to keep the rear end full. I do have a thing of grease that I put around the seal and things on the shaft just to make it so it's a little easier to put the hub back on when it's time. A hub tool, some hammers. It's amazing how many sockets you actually use to do this, but I've got a breaker bar. I've got 2 torque wrenches because my big torque wrench that goes up to 140 pound, well, it goes up to 150, but my wheels need to be torqued at 140, the lug nuts do. The shaft, or the axle itself nut, once you torque it at about 65, then you got to back it off 90 and then torque it at 15 Well, my big torque wrench won't handle that, so I use my little torque wrench, which is inch-pounds, and so I'm using about 180 inch-pounds, which relates to about 15 foot-pounds. So, and then of course some slip joint pliers for taking the hubcap off. Definitely have gloves, and you gotta make sure you have your safety glasses too. So just paper towels. Might want to have a couple rolls of paper towels. I went through those pretty fast, and so it's nice to have all these things kind of handy at your fingertips. So you notice when we're going to remove the hubcap that we have these little silver things here that cover up the lug nuts. So the first thing we have to do is find out which ones are false and which ones are real. So you can hear that it's kind of hollow. That one's not, and this one's not. Also, the other way to look at it is, if on mine anyway, I have my valve stem here and it's in line with my valve stems, so that's how I want to put them back on too. But if I use some pliers like this, some slip joint pliers, I can actually grab those, wiggle them and pull them off. So we take these false caps off, set them to the side, and then what we have left is the nuts that's actually holding this on. So we're going to take those off. These are actually torqued on here at a very low torque, so I'm going to use this wrench, this automatic wrench, and I'm just going to take those off. So. Alright, so we just kind of wiggle it back and forth. And just kind of pop off there. Move the valve stem out of the way, and then here we go. It's off, and we can set it to the side. So you'll notice that what the nut from the hubcap was holding the hubcap on is a little spacer nut here. It's actually different than the rest of the lug nuts that go around here. So we need to remove this piece off here also. Again, this is very low torque, so I'm just going to use this little thing to take that off. Alright, so the only thing I got left now is the actual lug nuts. Now those are torqued on there at 150 foot-pounds, where the other ones I just dealt with were 40 foot-pounds. So that's hardly anything, 40 foot-pounds, but 150 is quite a bit. So to take care of that, we're going to use a breaker bar to loosen them up. Okay. Now the reason we're going to loosen these up before we actually lift the tires off the ground, and the reason for that is, in this particular case, it happens to be a drive axle, but I don't want to put any extra pressure on my transmission or my drive line trying to get these loose, you know, jerking around on them or something. But also, if this was a front tire, then when you tried to undo them, it would just spin, and so it's a lot easier just to do it right. You know, when you're doing it by hand anyway, break it while it's on the ground, and then when you raise it up, then go ahead and remove them the rest of the way. So that's what we're going to do now. Because this is so deep here, it's going to be tough for me to have this on a breaker bar and get any torque on there, if any. So I'm going to use an extension. So I'll hook the extension on there and put that on my torque bar. And this is what I'll use to actually loosen these up. So you'll notice that I have to put a little bit of effort on it. And I just want to loosen up just a little bit. So I'm going to kind of work my way back and forth loosening. And I'm just making these so that I can get to them, get it to unscrew once I get the tire off the ground. Alright, so now they're loose, and we're ready to jack up the rig so that we can remove the tires. So for us to get this jacked up now, we're going to, this is where we're going to slide our jack under the back end here, and we're going to also be using our jack stand to help support the axle while we're working on it. Okay. Now it's important to note that you should make sure and chock your wheels before you start, so chock your front wheels. I also have my emergency brake on so it can't move, and then also I have raised my jacks. Alright, so I just want to make sure that when I jack it up that the jacks don't automatically start retracting because there's no pressure on them, and if they only retract part way and then I let the pressure off to lower the tire back down, I don't want it sitting on my jack kind of crooked. So in my particular case, I'm going to just release the jacks, and that way I don't have to worry about it. Now if your jacks can lift up your whole rig, then you could always use that as part of your jack system. Just make sure that you put a stand under it, a jack stand, to support it in case the jacks give way. That's what it's for. It's a safety there for you. Alright, so one thing I want to make a note of here for you is that every rig is different, and you really need to look at the specs that's in the manufacturer's book that's in your on your motorhome. It's usually in the glove box of the motorhome, and you want to see where your jack points are. So where are you supposed to put it? Now in this particular case, this is a Ford F53. You're supposed to put the jack under the axle towards the wheel, but this particular one has a tag axle, so they've added a lot of extra hardware under here. So I had to kind of figure out places that I could actually make the jack work. In my particular case, it's through these two fins over here, and I can get the jack to kind of go up through there, and then I'm using the jack stand as close to the tire on the axle as I can for my support. Now as I jack this up, I can raise this up. I want to see, if I can raise it up to get another notch under it. It's not quite there yet. See, now that fell down, so that's actually locked into place. Okay, what I'm trying to do is make sure that I get the tires off the ground. So the tires are not off the ground yet, so I'm going to continue jacking it up and raise it up another notch on the jack stand. So you notice that my jack stand's right here, and my jack's up, my tires are off the ground. I'm actually going to lower this down and until it sits on the axle, just very slowly. Now I'm going to lock that off so they are backing each other up at this point. I don't want any sudden drops onto the jack stand, so that's why I put some pressure on there. And then I want to make sure my wheel still is off the ground. So the nice thing about motorhomes is they're pretty tall, so you can slide under them for the most part pretty easily. Some have a lot of extra hardware, like mine has a lot of extra hardware for the tag axle that I have on here. A lot of you will only have one axle, and you'll be sitting pretty far off the ground. So in my case, it's a little tight fit here and there, but I just kind of slide under there and get to a point where I can get some leverage on that jack handle as I'm trying to raise the unit up. It takes quite a bit of force to lift that all the way up. But that's done, and we're ready to go. Make sure that you wear your safety glasses. The cool thing about those are, besides something falling at you, is that as you're sliding around there, and if you happen to hit somewhere with your face, the glasses help protect you. Alright, so the unit is raised up, our tire wiggles here. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and unscrew the rest of the lug nuts here, or we had loosened them before, now we're going to take them off. I'm going to use this rigid thing just to kind of speed the process up a little bit. I'm using the same socket that's for the lug nuts here with my extension, and I usually take these off. I kind of crisscross back and forth. So when I undo this last one, you're going to see the wheel kind of fall forward just a little bit. Now it's important that you undo this little spring that's just keeping this extended valve cover thing out of the way here, so I'm just going to kind of take that off there. And You may want to just remove your TPMS just to kind of make sure that you keep it nice and safe. Alright, so now we're going to remove the wheel. So you'll notice right here there's no clearance. And so we got to take the bottom of this and bend it out. And we can, utilizing the tire iron and just our hands, we're going to kind of tip this out and come out of there. The tire iron will come more in handy with the back one than the front one at the moment for taking it off. But I'm just going to bend this forward. I'm going to pull it out here. Get it out here as far as I can so that when I tip it forward, I'm clearing this upper fender. And I'll just roll that to the side. Now my back one here, okay, I need to get it moving along here too. So I'm going to just kind of use this tire iron to kind of push down on it. So I'm just lifting it up a little bit. So I'm pushing down on it. Just kind of allows me to push it off the edge here. Okay. Once I get it over here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull the bottom out and tip it so it comes out of here. Okay. Just tipping it back. These tires are pretty heavy, so it takes a little bit to work them. Tip it out and just roll it to the side. So our tires are off. So let's go ahead and take a little closer look at our axle here and also our rotor and caliper. Okay. So let's take a look here at our rotor. I think you're getting kind of a glare there, but you can kind of see all these little cracks in it. So that's not a good sign. That means what's happened is that's been really overheated, and so it's cracked that rotor, and it's degrading it. So we need to get that replaced. The other thing over here, you'll notice that this caliper has all kinds of junk on it. And if we look underneath here, it's just been leaking. Okay. Another place we can look is on the back of our tire here. So this is the inside dual that we pulled off. You can see how we got a lot of extra stuff that's been pouring out on those, and it's been collecting dirt as we've been driving. So as we look at our caliper here, this particular setup, the way that Ford has it done, is it does not use any bolts or anything to bolt the caliper on. In this particular case, it uses a little wedge that goes in between here and the actual frame of the caliper. So this is the piece that slides back and forth for the brakes. And so what we need to do is take that pin out of there, and then it'll slide away from this support mechanism, which is the actual frame of the wheel set up there. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're just going to squeeze that. Two pieces of metal that's got some burrs on the end of it. We're going to squeeze it and just kind of tap it through with a hammer and push it out the other side, or have it come forward, whichever works out easiest for you. Both sides are the same setup. They have a spur on both sides, so it can go in and out whichever side you want to use it at. Whatever's more convenient. So as I got that up there, I'm just going to kind of squeeze it a little bit. It's got some little burrs I'll show you when it's out, but the key here is it might be even easier to have a third hand if you had one, and they could just kind of squeeze that as you nail that through there. So as you can see, this little piece is coming out. Just got to keep hitting on it until you get it all the way through. Okay, so I've gone ahead and removed the little pins, and you can kind of see back in there, that's where that pin went. There's also one on the bottom of the caliper. I can get the light over here, you can kind of see in there. Okay, and this is what those pins look like. So they have a rubber piece that's between the two pieces of metal. There's a little lip on there, okay, and you'll notice that it's on one side of it, so these go in a certain way. So you got to make sure that, come up here and look at this one, that upper lip ends up being right here. When you put it back in, that's what actually holds it in there. If you put it in the upside down, it'll just slide completely in and out. Alright, you'll notice that as we look at this caliper, it's nice and greasy, so I have put on some gloves. That'll help kind of protect my hands a little bit so I don't get them so greasy. And if you look, there's a line right here. I'm trying to highlight it with the light, but there's a line on the top and the bottom of the caliper. And that's where it actually slides back and forth there. So I'm going to take a hammer. I want to actually pull this out of there, but it's pretty tight. And so I'm going to just kind of take a hammer and I'm going to just kind of, you know, tap it back and forth until it comes loose, and then I'll set it up here out of the way. So that's what we're doing now. And we don't want to beat on it, we're just kind of tapping it. It'll come loose pretty easily with just taps. Okay, we got it almost loose. The biggest thing is, if we take this loose, we want to protect this brake line that's in here. So you can see this brake line, it's a flexible hose. We don't want to break that or anything, so we're just kind of holding this up, and we're gonna, you can see how it just wiggles now. I'm just gonna wiggle that out of there. And just set it up here to the side. In my case, since I have the tag axle mechanism all here, it gives me a place to actually set it. You might not have that, so you might want to have some wire that you can put through there or something and just tie it up out of the way, just to make sure there's no pressure on this. Okay. Now we've left the old brake pad on here that come with the thing, so I'm just going to kind of take it out of here. So this is the old pad, which actually looks pretty good. I would have expected it to be all cracked like the rotor is. And now we have the rotor free. Alright, so now that the caliper is removed, our next step will be to go ahead and remove these front bolts on the front here. We got 8 of them. So again, using our breaker bar, we're going to just break these loose, just to loosen them up just a little bit. Not terribly tight, but that one was a lot tighter. Okay, those are nice and loose, and we're ready to go ahead and remove those bolts. So again, we'll, using our socket here and our little wrench, or our ratcheting drill, we can take those off. Now, before we do this, because this is a floating system, there's grease in the, or oil that's part of the axle system. It comes through here, and that's what lubricates these bearings. Before we loosen this up much, it'll start leaking here. So I'm going to make sure we put our oil pan under here, and then we can go ahead and pull those out. So we'll go ahead and do that. It's nice to have something to put the bolts into also, kind of keep them separate. So we'll get that all set up and we'll be ready to continue. Alright, so we have everything set up here. We have a little bucket here to catch the oil that might come out of here, that will, and then a place to put our bolts. We got this jacked up so it's kind of on a little bit of a tilt, so all the oil that's in the rear end is not going to come pouring out here. Hopefully we'll be able to keep most of it in there. But anyway, go ahead and take these off. I can smell the rear end oil coming. Have that loose and we're ready to go ahead and pull it. So we just take this axle plate, we just kind of pull it out here. You can see the grease starting to come out of there now. It just came straight out. Grab me a little cloth here. I'm just kind of pulling this axle. And I pulled that off the gears on the axle or the rear end. I could just kind of feel that release. So I'm just kind of pulling it through. You'll see that this has little gear ends on there to go in there, and that's our drive line. So we'll just take that and set it to the side. Okay, we're not getting a lot of oil drained out of here, but we are getting some. So now the nut that we have in here, I'm going to have to go get a nut for that. So I'm going to take a picture of that. I'm going to run down to AutoZone. Hopefully they'll have something, maybe O'Reilly. And if not, then we'll head to Nampa. So I did go to the Ford dealer and I tried to get the Ford tool because this is a Ford F53. Ford says, no, we don't sell tools, we don't rent tools or anything. So go to AutoZone. So that's kind of weird if you ask me, but anyway, so we're free. All that's here now is this axle just turns back and forth because it's on this big spindle. So the actual drive portion of it, which was the axle that we just pulled out, actually hooks to the rear end and then bolts here, and then that's what makes you be able to drive and have your wheel work. So it's kind of interesting how they have this engineered. But this nut here on the front is a little different than the spindles when you're changing the grease on the front bearings. But and this is because these bearings float in here. There's no grease, it just kind of floats. And so you'll see that there is a little bit that came out of that. It's a heavy gear oil. It's a special gear oil, so you need to look at what your manufacturer, what the specs are in your book for there. It tells you what kind that you're supposed to use. And that's the kind that we'll put back in there to replace this if we're too low to do that. So depending on how much leaks out between now and then. So that's where we're at. I'm going to take a picture of that, head off to the store, and then I'll be back. So the wind's picked up a little bit here, but I did get the tool, and hopefully the wind won't be too much of a noise deterrent here. But one thing that's interesting is it does fit in here, but it only fits one way. So you got to kind of turn it around until these little sprockets actually line up with the actual piece itself. And then, just using a regular 1/2 inch driver here, we're just going to get that on there and just start turning that. Can almost turn that by hand at the moment. There we go. All this nut does is compress the bearing up against the hub there. So we've now got that out of there. So again, this is just another nut type of setup. just going to set it in this thing here. We have this is our little, it's keyed right here, so it can only go in one way. So we want to pay attention to how we take this stuff apart. But that's also the thing that locks on here to keep it from turning once we get it tight. So this one's been kind of bent, so looks like that was actually smashed down over that, and I probably just didn't notice it, and just came undone. So anyway, so that's done. Actually, it looks like there's another nut, so maybe I got to do one more thing here. Let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, I don't know what this one was. That's kind of interesting. Kind of a lock nut setup, but I got another one on here, and it's not done that way, so it's a little different. So it don't move, so I'm gonna have to put this back on here and see if I can get this to release. Well, didn't take much to get it to turn, so we're just gonna go ahead and, so this is starting to act like it's just like the front axles as far as the nut that we tighten on there, so that makes me feel good because I've done that a lot. It's these rear ones that kind of make me wonder because they're so weird, and it's really heavy and big. So alright, so we're taking that nut off. Hopefully this is the last one. We'll set that one to the side. So now we have our little, what do you call that, washer thing that fits against the bearing. So I'm going to pull on this just a little bit so that it'll kind of push the bearing out here, and then I'll take the bearing out and set it down, and then I'll just pull the drum and everything off. So the hub, it's really heavy, so it'll take a little bit of work. So I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way and get ready. I might just be doing a little bit of grunting here, but here we go. There it goes. So here's our bearing. So there's that little washer I mentioned. There's our bearing, and now I'm just going to lift this off. Okay, we got it off. It does weigh a lot. Alright, we'll rearrange the camera here so you can kind of see what's going on a little bit. We did lose a little bit of oil out on the ground here. Okay, we lost a little bit of oil out on the ground. There's some in there. I'm going to kind of tip that back in there a little bit. Let it pour out. Huh, that's a heavy little beast. Alright, so just to show, here's the, so this is my rotor, and then it's bolted onto my hub with these 10 little nuts or bolts, and it looks like they have kind of a special little socket or some kind of a star socket that takes those off. So that'll be the next chore we got to work on. Took me a little while to find the socket, but it's this socket right here. And if you look right in there, it's a really kind of an odd looking pattern to it. So anyway, this is called a Torque Plus. EP18 is the size that I needed, and I was able to actually use my breaker bar and actually loosen these bolts up, and then I used my ratchet wrench to unscrew them all so they're all ready to pull off. If I back up here just a little bit, you'll see I actually took it and put the hub backwards onto the tire laying on the ground. That just gave me a surface that I could actually use my breaker bar and be able to hold that hub while I was actually trying to get the bolts loose. So that's all done, and now we're ready to actually remove the rotor from the actual hub. But I wanted to show you something here. As I started going through this and looking at it a little bit closer, I noticed if you look in here, you'll see how wet it is. And if we follow that wetness up to between the two rotors there, then you can see that the fluid really was coming from this seal and then getting wound around here and coming out the inside of the actual rotor. So when I looked at the rotor from an outside view, then I could see that it was very, had all these discolors on here and stuff inside here because the liquid's been coming through there. So I wanted to look back at the caliper again, and as I started looking at the caliper a lot closer, if you notice the back of that has stuff all along the back of it, meaning that the rotor was turning inside there between the two brake pads, and all that fluid that was leaking from the axle was being sprayed out onto the back of the rotor there. So the rotor itself, if you can see the actual cups there, they're not leaking at all. So the actual caliper is fine. So we're not going to replace the caliper at this point. We're just going to reuse those. We'll put new pads on along with the new rotor, and I think we'll be good just like that. So it is the seal, so I went out and purchased a seal also. They're a little pricey, like $50 just for that little seal. So we're going to work on getting the seal out of there once we get the rotor off of the drum. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and taken the bolts out, and I got to take this rotor off. Best way to do it is it's stuck on there, so if you use a rubber mallet, you're not going to damage this. Now in this case I'm just going to discard it, and I'm going to put a new one on here. But if you were looking at it in the sense that I'm going to take this down to have it turned, that's where they clean it off and make it so it's still usable if it's not too thin when they're done. So in this particular case I'm going to replace it, but if I was going to take it to turn it, I'm just going to knock it off this way so it doesn't damage it. So just kind of go around it, and there it goes, it's all off. Okay, so we can take that and we're done with it. Alright, so now went ahead and got the seal out. I'll show you up here close. This seal, I put a puller here and actually tried to pull it straight up. It would not work. I ended up cutting off all the rubber around here, and what I ended up doing in the end was just utilizing my crowbar, getting it under like that, and taking a nice sledgehammer and just going like this. So I'd stick it under that lip, hit it really hard. It took some little coaxing, a few nice words, and about 20 slings on that thing pretty hard, and finally it just flipped right out of there. And so I don't know if the new one's going to go in that hard or not, but this one's finally out. So the new one right here, so we're going to go ahead and just set that down in there. Oh, before I do that, let me show you. So I've got a tube here, and I'm hoping this is going to work. So the key with the seals is that you got to put something on there to hit down on it, and normally they don't have this little ridge on here, so this is kind of a different design than any seal I've put in before. And so I went out and I found this that actually fits over that, and it's small enough. If you look at it here, it's small enough that it should fit down into the hole where it's got to go. So if you look down in here, you'll see there's this little kind of a shiny spot right there. That's what the actual seal sets against. And then if you look up from that, you'll see that there's another line right here. So this upper part right here where my finger's going back and forth is the actual hub. Then it comes into this smaller piece that's beveled just a little bit, and that's what the seal sits in and gets knocked down until it hits that shiny part. Okay, and then when we're hitting it down, we should be able to hear, once it hits that shiny ring going around there, once that's all seated there going around there correctly, we should be able to hear the difference. And that's how we kind of know if we have to keep kind of banging on it or not. So I'm going to go ahead and take this ring and the seal and kind of clean it off a little bit here. And I'm going to set it down inside there. So that's in there. Now I'm going to take my pipe that I've got. I'm going to set that right on there. And I have this nice hunk of metal that I like to use here. It covers that hole, kind of gives it a nice flat banging surface. And then I'm going to take my sledgehammer and I'm just going to kind of beat on it and try to beat that in there as straight down as possible. Well, let's see how we're doing. And we have a long ways to go, it shows. So this pipe might just be too bouncy. Alright, so I've gone ahead and taken the hub off the wheel because I don't want the bouncy rubber thing. That's kind of what happened when I started to put this in. And I'm just putting it on this little piece of carpet so that it doesn't get all messed up from the... I don't want to get this surface messed up when I try to pound this in here. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to continue pounding that. I want to pound this down in there, and ooh, that sounded pretty solid, so that might have just gone in there just perfect. Get our little spacer thing out. Okay, our seal is pounded down in there, and what I did was I actually used this little picker tool and I slid it down underneath the seal, and I just was kind of going against the back of the thing right here like this, trying to feel if there was a little lip. And after we left last time, I kind of came around here and there was actually about a 1/16 of an inch. I could still feel the lip, which now I can't. So what I did is I actually put the piece back in there again, and I pounded on it a couple more times on this one side over here. And now when I put this in there and go around, I actually don't feel a lip anywhere. So now I know for sure that that seal is nice and flat in there, and we're ready to move on to the next piece. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to clean these bolts up. They've got a lot of grease on them, so I can take that off pretty easily. But they also got some Loctite left over on the threads, so I want to clean those all up and wire brush them real good. I'm actually going to use this little brake clean stuff to kind of spray on here, and that will help me clean up get all the grease, hard grease off, and then I'm going to use this little picker to kind of go along here and clean up the threads here, and then I'll wire brush those threads off and get it all cleaned up. So I'll do all that and get it ready to go ahead and put the rotor on, and I'll be back. Alright, so the bolts are all cleaned up. The next thing I'm going to do is take the actual rotor, and I want to put it on here. So you'll notice I've taken the hub, I've set it back on the rim again just to give me some support there so I can tighten down and torque these as I put them in. So the thing is I've got this lip here. I'm going to set this rotor on there. I don't want to smash it down through that lip yet. I want to take it and rotate it around until the holes line up. And then I want to take my bolts that I've cleaned all up and got all the junk off the threads and everything, and I want to actually put all those in, make sure that they actually start in there, and then I'll start tightening them down a little bit at a time, and it will actually push the rotor down onto the hub, and then it should be a nice tight fit right here, and that way I don't kink it, and I make sure that all the holes are going to line up. So we're going to do that now, and then we'll be back as soon as we get this ready. Alright, so as you can see, I started putting all the bolts down in here, and I just wanted to show you, I just put a little bit of thread locker on these and then inserted them in there, and I'll go ahead and tighten these all down. Okay, so now I've got those, the actual rotor is torqued on and ready to go, and I've got this laid out here so I can get it ready to go onto the hub. And if you look inside, you can see I've put a little bit of oil in there. So this is what's called for my particular motorhome, so that's what I went down to the Ford dealer and got. And I'm just putting it in there just because some of it drained out when we turned it upside down. Whatever was in here was drained out, and I'm just putting some in there so when I slide this back on, it won't be completely dry. And I've moved the bearing, the back bearing around, and now I'm going to go ahead and slide this on. Okay, here we go. This is angled around here so I can kind of get it up. I'm going to take this bearing, go ahead and slide it in there, kind of prop it up a little bit. Oh. All right, it's back on. Now so one thing I didn't mention also is I put some oil on this outside bearing, got it all ready so I could just slide it in there to help support that. So as we lift up on this or try to turn it, see, it should turn pretty easily. And there we go. Just kind of keep working it in there until it's on. All right, so now we've got to put our ring on that we took off. This is our big washer. It's got a little lip here in the middle. Just going to put that on there, slide that up. We'll take I kept these separate. This one has the lockers on it that you bend down over that, and this one was the one that was up actually against that washer. So I'm going to take those and put it on there, so help hold that in place. So here we go. There we go. Like that. So now it's on there. We're going to grab the actual socket and we'll tighten this up. This goes through a little different setup than some. Some you torque this down to a certain torque, back it off 90, and then re-torque it. That's how ours works. Others you torque down to a certain thing and then you click it back so many. So I know that that's what Ford is. I don't know how any other one is, but that's how this one's done. So just check your manual, see what this is supposed to be set at, then go from there. Alright, so I have the hub wrench. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there, and remember, it was kind of, I got to get it until it lines up with the nut. Now, my I found a manual on Chilton that kind of talked about these torques. It didn't have an F53, but it did have a Ford truck, Super Duty truck, that kind of gave me the torques. So I'm going to just keep doing this and turning this until I get this nut on there tight and I can torque it. So in this particular case, this is going to be torqued at 65. So we are at 65 right now. Then it says to back it off a quarter turn. So we're going to go back 1/4 turn. Let me get this. All right, so we'll go back 1/4 turn. This is where we're at. So I'm going back to there. And then it says to torque it at 15 foot-pounds, 15 to 20 foot-pounds. Okay, and then we got to go back. We went back. Now we got to do this at about 15 foot-pounds. I'm actually using an inch-pound torque. It's a 1/4 inch, so I'm kind of expanding it up. But I found out that my big torque wrench doesn't really do much at 15. So now I've tightened this down. So I was back 90, so that's a 1/4 turn back. I'm coming back and I got this right where I can hear it. So I know that that's right where that's supposed to be. And then as I started looking at this, I just wanted to point out that there's little tabs. These ones fold over on the front of the nut. This one here actually folds down onto the little slots that are in this nut. So as I put this on, because it's got this little key, I put it on there, that actually goes into the slot. So the nut's kind of right back where it was, or pretty on, must be where it was or close, because it's got that little notch there, so we can't put it any other place. And then I'm going to just take this, and this is our other nut. We'll screw that down, and then we'll bend over one of these little things here. We'll just take a little punch and punch that over just so it holds this nut so it doesn't go anywhere. So we'll go ahead and snug that up against the other nut that's in there, and that'll complete this portion of it. I should also note that some hubs have a righty-tighty and lefty-loosey, and sometimes the other side has the exact opposite, so you kind of need to pay attention to which one yours is. If it's the ratcheting kind on the Ford, then the passenger side has the righty-tighty, where the driver's side has the opposite of that. So that line back up again. Turn that in there. Kind of snug. Just make sure that our other nut doesn't turn. Don't want it any tighter. Alright, so if you take a little closer look here, you can see where I kind of lined this up a little bit with this one pin here, so we're going to bend that over. And if you, it's kind of hard to see back in there, so you can't really see the other one, but we're kind of snugged up against here. We'll put that over there. That'll kind of hold this locking nut so it can't come undone, and then that way the one in the back won't come undone also. So alright, you can see where I've now bent this over right here. And then if you look, I don't think you can see it, but right behind there is where that other one is, and I made sure and smashed it down a little bit better. We also have to clean up these bolts before we can actually put the axle back on, get the threads all done, everything all cleaned up. So we'll work on those. I'm going to put some formal gasket on there. There is no real gasket for this part, so we just want to put something on there, and all that's doing really It's just keeping the oil from seeping out. Alright, the axle is ready to go. We've pulled the stuff out of there that was holding the oil in, and I'm just going to take this axle, grab it back here, and we're going to just slide it in. Right down the tube. Now as we get to the end, it hits about right there, and that's because we got to kind of turn it and get it into the gears. But as we do, we have to also make sure that we line these holes up. So they are off just a little bit. So trial and error. Alright, so we have to just kind of keep pulling this out and twisting it just a little bit. And trying it again. Until we get all the holes lined up. That might have it. So I'm going to just kind of start a couple bolts in here to see if they'll get started. So I think we're good. Yeah, so we're going to line up everywhere. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these out, and I'm going to go ahead and put some of this Loctite on there just a little bit, just to kind of hold it. The stuff they had in here before, I think, was actually orange, which is a vibration stuff to not vibrate loose. We're using blue, so it's a little more. It'll make it a little harder to take it apart later, but that's what we have now, so I think we'll just make that work. Okay. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to just kind of snug it up with our little ratchet wrench. That is it for that. Now we're ready to put the caliper on. So, and then we'll come back after we put this down and everything. We'll actually torque this. It only torques at about 50-60 pounds, so it doesn't take a lot of torque on it. All right, we're ready to get started on the caliper. The first thing we have to do is we have to compress the calipers. So if you look right here, I've got a little C-clamp on here. This is a 4-inch C-clamp. You can see how far the calipers are sticking out right now. I'm just using the old brake pad, and I'm just going to squeeze that back until that's flat. The reason we have to do that is because the new pads are a lot bigger, plus the rotor's bigger, so we need all the space we can get. Now there's a couple things you got to pay attention when you're doing this. First of all, you got to make sure you have room in your brake reservoir for the brake fluid that's being pushed out of here back up to your brakes reservoir. Another way you can do it is you can actually undo the bleeder valve and let it squeeze out the brake fluid into a little jar as you do this, if you've got too much in your other thing. The other school of thought on that is that I'm basically pushing all the junk back up the line here. So some people think that it's better to just push it out and put new fluid in. I actually flushed these not too long ago, so I'm not really too worried about that right now. So, but I have heard that thought. So we're just going to kind of keep easing this up a little bit on the C-clamp. I'll show you the difference. Alright, I think we're nice and snug. So I'm going to undo the C-clamp, take the brake out of the old brake out of there. Okay, so you can see that this has all been compressed, so it's pretty smooth. Gives us the clearance we need to be able to slide this over the rotor with the new brake pads on there. Now you can see by looking at these old pads where the marks were where it was touching before, and then our new pads. So we want to put some grease in those particular spots to help it kill the dampening noise, plus it will make it so it wears right there a little bit better. Alright, so I put this back pad onto this caliper. You see there's a couple little grooves there. Up here, if we go up to this side here, you can see there's a little clip that holds that on right there. And if we move over to this other side, you see there's some metal things right there too, where that's what holds that pad in place. So you just kind of squeeze it on there. The other one sits right here in place. So that's ready to go. Now we just have to slide it on. Now I've actually lubricated the sides over here. So if I come over here and, sorry, moving this all around, but this is the place where the sliders slide in and out, and so the caliper just slides right in here. So I have lubricated on here and up here on this top here, along with on the caliper itself, along this whole rail here, so that the thing can just slide in. It's going to come in from the back and just go straight in. So that's how I'm going to do it right now, and I'll be ready to put the pins in a minute. So I went to put the caliper on. A little bit of a problem, so you have to have the brake pad on here first that actually slides in that little groove right there. So I probably should put a little bit of grease back and forth right there. That's where it slides back and forth on this piece right here. So I don't know if you can see it there, but there's a little indentation right there. That's where the brake goes. So I'll put the pad in there. I'll show you what it looks like when I get it in. Okay, you can kind of see now I've got the brake pads in there, so that's all by itself, and then the caliper will actually slide over that. Alright, so we've slid the caliper on there. It just kind of slides around since we cleaned it off and everything. The next thing, so the brake pads on the inside, brake pads out here. We have these little spacers that we have to put back in here. We got to make sure that we put the upper side on the upside, otherwise it'll just slide right through. So it'll go through there just like that. So we'll squeeze it and stick it in there. Okay, so just like that. Get the other one started too. I think the hooks on this is up on the upper side. I gotta make sure the hooks on this one are on the bottom. Get that lined up better there. Alright, so we gotta make sure we get that on the upside, this direction. Alright, so there we go. Now when we get that into where it goes, it actually, you'll hear it kind of go ping ping because it's hitting the other part of it there. And if you don't hear it, that just means it's keeping going, and you put it in upside down. So you hear that? We've hit the end of that, and that's that one, and I'll do the same on the top. Brakes on, and we're ready to put the tires on. Alright, the last thing we have to do is to get the tires back on. So we're going to use our tire iron here and tip these so that we can bypass this fender. And I'm going to lift this up here, just like that. And I'm just going to put this flat edge of this thing under the tire and lean that on there. I'll just kind of use it to push the tire over where it's got to go. And look at that. Now, there's this nice little hole right here that's between these two lug nuts, and I have to get that lined up on the actual axle. There's an extra pin, so it's right here. So I'm going to have to switch this wheel around just a little bit. So if I go to the edge here, I'm going to actually bypass that first lug nut there. And that's where the pin is. That's on there now with the pin right here going through there. The other tire has the same hole, so you have to link them up that way. And one thing that's easy to notice is the valve stem on this one is going to be opposite of the other one. So that's one way to know if we are in the wrong spot a little bit. So we're going to slide that up, and we'll push that in there a little bit. Now we're on the hub. Let's slide this around. Should be there, yep. That's basically it. Now we just put on these kind of a little bit at a time to kind of get the wheel to rock back and forth. Those are a lot harder to work with than singles, but if you use this tire iron, it makes that a lot easier, even with the single ones. Alright, that's where that goes. So I'm just going to put the rest of these on. Now these get torqued down at 140 pounds, foot-pounds, so they have quite a bit of torque on them. But for now, until we set it down, we're just going to kind of snug them up with the ratchet wrench, and then we'll go ahead and work on getting under there and getting the jack down and everything, and I won't waste your time on that. We'll come back when this is done, and I'll show you how to put that hubcap on, so that it's not a mystery anymore. There we go. Good job. Alright, so that's the end of those. Torqued those on at 140. I torqued the center axle nuts on at 55 is what it called for. So those are done. And so now I'm ready to put on the hubcap. So when we put the hubcap on, the first thing we have to put on is these little expanders that go over on the nuts themselves, on the posts. And they're going to be in line with the valve stems. That's an easy way to keep track of it, and you don't have to keep guessing, trial and error, which I've done, and that's why I know that this is how it works now. So I'm just going to put those onto the top of the stud, and then I'm going to roll my torque wrench down to 40 psi is what, or psi, 40 foot-pounds is what it calls for to have these torqued at, so I'm going to move this down to 40. So it doesn't take a lot to hold these on per se. So you can see I'm just barely pushing and it locks those on. So you can see I've put those on there now, and we have those torqued down. The thing we want to make sure before we put our HUD cap on is to make sure that our valve stem's out here and this little springy thing is what's holding it away from everything when we're driving. So we want to make sure that's out, connected. These are on there, torqued, and then now we're ready to put our hubcap on. Now we got to put the hubcap on. You'll notice it's got the 2 holes there. That's what we're going to line up there. Plus we have to make sure that we get this valve stem out of the way. I'm going to use a screwdriver to help me with that. Now, the key here is we want to make sure this is nice and flush all the way around here, and that's how we know it's actually on there all the way. We kind of keep working that back and forth until those are flush. So when I mean flush, it's these nuts are pretty much flush with the bolts themselves, and then you know that's on there nice and tight. And I've torqued that down at 40 foot-pounds. The next thing that we got to do is we got to put these little caps on. If you look at them, you can see like little dents in them. If you go to put this on, it's not going on or not staying on, then you can actually take something, put a hole behind here and kind of hit on that a little bit or squeeze it. And I'm just going to take those and line them up, and they just kind of snap on like that. Doesn't take a lot. And that one's actually kind of loose, so I'm going to switch these around, see if that helps out. Nope. So this one's still loose. So to fix this, I've got this little indent I need to make there. I'm going to just use this little tool. This is just a regular box-in wrench. In this case, 7/16, but just enough to fit in there. Okay. And I'm going to put it kind of close here. I'm going to step on it, and then I'm just going to hit right there. So I'm just going to make that a little bit deeper on these spots that they've actually indented before. So this will just give me a little bit of solid this, and we'll just put that right there. Doesn't take a lot. Turn it around to the other one. Get that kind of centered up. Kind of moved. Alright, that's all there is to it. And now when it slides on, it'll be a lot stiffer. Stay on there. Alright, so this is the rear end of the drive line. And if you notice here, we've got a plug. And I'm going to actually just take that off with this adjustable wrench. When you put that on, you just kind of snug it up there, so it's not on real hard. But this is how you check your rear end. So you just take your finger and put in there, and you should be able to feel the oil. And I do have some fairly close to the top. But I'm going to go ahead and add some more for what we just lost. So I have this funnel, and I've put a little rubber tube on here, and I'm just going to kind of turn that into there. Take my transmission fluid that I bought. It's a 75 140 synthetic that I got from Ford. That's what my owner's manual said to use. So I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of this in here. And remember, it's not just this round spot on the axle that I'm filling up, it's the whole length of the axle itself. So it takes quite a bit of fluid, and these quarts are $30 a piece, so it's really pretty expensive stuff. Luckily, you don't have to do it too often. Alright, we are right there at the top. So that is looking good. I'm going to go ahead and put my plug back in. And again, I'm just going to snug it up. So once you're done doing the axles and everything, you know, and that fluid has drained out, it's important to check it. Also check your brake fluid. Alright, so that's nice and tight. We'll go check our brake fluid now. Alright, we are up under my rig to check the brake fluid. And in this particular case, this is located by my engine compartment, but it's up under where my front tire is. So I'm kind of crawled under the rig right now above my front tire, looking up at my brake fluid level there. So the line, the tube itself, see if I can point over there. So this is my low spot, and this is my high spot. So I'm kind of in the middle there, and so that's the thing I just want to make sure of. Check that, make sure your brake fluid's not going to be low, or maybe you overflowed it if you didn't pay attention to that beforehand. Just be prepared for that. And then to fill this one, the lid is up there on the top, and I have to actually lift up the inside and go from the inside out to put a tube down there, because there is just no clearance up there at all. So every rig's going to be a little different, so just check out what yours is like. Well, what a job that was. Finished it up. It actually took me just over, well, about 3 days since I started. Yeah, it's been about 3 days because I had to keep running to the store, going to the Ford dealer, checking things out, you know. I did finally find the Chilton thing online. I created a subscription with them so that I could at least get the stuff because I couldn't find the book locally. So I was able to find out more information. But when you have an older rig, remember this is a 94, and when you have older rigs, it's tough. You know, I think Ford said they for sure don't go back more than 10 years. So on their little thing, so it's really difficult to go to Ford for anything. And so just kind of keep that in mind. I'm sure other dealers are the same way, and you know, just be aware of it, you know, and just work through it. So in this particular case, we've got it done. It looks great, and I think this will take care of our problem with all the stuff that we've done. So everything looking good, and we're ready to get back on the road. And that was the whole idea of doing this ourselves, just so that we could get going again, because we do live in the rig full time. So again, this is for just as much for you as for me, because when I first had this issue, I could not find anything on YouTube as far as, you know, how to even take my brakes off, you know, the calipers off, get them off the rotors, you know, and things. So that's why I wanted to kind of put this together. Hopefully this will be of help for you. Please make comments below, give us a thumbs up if you can, just to help me out. You know, what we're trying to do is just grow this channel and get things out there that is of value to you guys, and that's what it's all about. I know how to do this now, and I hadn't done it before per se. I'd done the front axles. I will make up some things for the fronts also and put that out, but this is at least how to do the duals, and they are a bear just because they're so heavy to work with. So I can't imagine doing this on a diesel pusher. Those hubs are probably massive to get off there. You need some kind of a, you know, something to lift them up and roll them out of there. But anyway, this is a gas rig. It's not quite as bad. They are heavy, but you can do it. So with that said, that ends our video, and we'll just say we'll see you down the road.